of service, to put yourself out to do good for others if you knew that that service was not just for the other person, but it was for Jesus Himself? You see, people sometimes get under each other's skin. We don't always treat each other right. Sometimes we offend each other and hurt each other's feelings. And so when I'm asked to serve someone else, sometimes I may not really want to because they did this or they said this. But if my service hinges not upon the person, but upon my relationship to Jesus Christ, how can I say no? If Jesus were to ask me, will you help me? Most definitely I would. And so when you're called upon to serve, when there's some deed that needs to be done, some task or ministry that you need to be involved in, it's not about the people who ask for your assistance. It's about Jesus Christ Himself. The service that you render is not to men, but to Jesus Christ Himself. Also consider this. As we serve, we need to serve with humility. The Philippian letter, in Philippians chapter 2 and verses 1 through 4, the Apostle Paul said, "Therefore, if there is any consolation in Christ, if any comfort of love, if any fellowship of the Spirit, if any affliction or affection of mercy, fulfill my joy and be like-minded, having the same love, being of one accord and one mind. Let nothing be done through strife or selfish ambition, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem other better than self. Let each of you look out not only for his own interest, but also for the interests of others." If we could serve, not for what I get out of it, but for what I give to others, that'll help us to serve. When my youngest son was about 3 years old, he thought Dad can do anything. He was so impressed with his dad. And he was in that stage where Dad's strong, he can do anything. And so we were out in the yard one day, and there was a tree on the edge of our property. It was probably 30 or 40 feet tall. Big tree. I couldn't reach around it. It was that big. And so I walked up to it, and I acted like I was going to push it over. And I got up against that tree, and I pushed. And right as I pushed on that, there was a crack like the sound of a shotgun. There was this big boom, and that tree began to fall. The tree fell over in the yard, and I was just stunned. I stood there and looked at what had happened, and I looked at my son because I was concerned that the tree didn't fall on him. And as I looked at him, his mouth was dropped open, jaw agape, and he just looked at me like, wow, my dad just pushed over a tree. Now at that point, I could do one of two things. I could say, yeah, your dad, man, I'm telling you, I'm really strong, and that's just a sample. I can do better things than that. And I could make my son think I'm all the more strong. Or I could say, you know what, Matthew, I'm glad you weren't hurt. That tree was rotten through and through and was just about to fall down. Well, now, which would I choose? Well, maybe I didn't choose the best one, but I know what we should have done. You know, sometimes we do things just to make ourselves look better. And when it comes to serving Christ, why do you serve as you serve? Do you serve so that other people will look at you and say, wow, that person's really good? Boy, look at that. Isn't that nice? You know what he did for her or what he did for him? If that's our motive, we need to rethink that. You know, I see people that serve God every day, and they serve God behind closed doors. They serve God where no one sees and no one knows. They involve themselves in menial tasks of service every day of their life, and no one knows about it. It doesn't make the church bulletin. It doesn't make an announcement sheet. Nobody knows, but they serve nonetheless. Think of how many ladies have husbands, or how many husbands have wives who through some illness, some debilitating accident are left unable to care for themselves. And so day by day, these men and women serve the one they love. It doesn't make the front page, but it truly is what Christ was about. You know, I'm reminded of a passage, one of my favorite verses in all the Bible. It's found in Hebrews chapter 6 and verse 10. The Hebrew writer tells us in that passage, "For God is not unjust to forget our labor of love, and that we have ministered and shown love toward His name, and that you have ministered to the saints and continue to minister." Isn't that a wonderful passage? God is not unjust to forget the labor of love that we perform. While no one may see all those menial tasks that we do behind closed doors, God takes note. Do you remember Jesus in Mark chapter 9 said, "If you will but give a cup of water in my name, you will in no wise lose your reward." We need to be a people of service, people who can serve God when folks are looking and when no one's looking. There are people that I know of who have put into practice and have tried to implement into their family this concept of anonymous service. I can think of a couple that when an ambulance goes by, you know, we all are fascinated with the ambulance, the light and the sound, and we all take note and we all pull off to the side of the road and we let them pass by and we're fascinated by it all. But how often do we realize that every time you see one of those flashing lights and hear that siren, there's a family hurting. There's someone who's probably scared to death. Well, I know a family who has taken that opportunity that often fascinates the rest of us. They take that opportunity to say a prayer. They don't know who's hurt. They don't know the families involved. But they together as a family will just say a quick prayer for the family that is in need at that moment. Does that count? Is that service to God? Well, absolutely it is. I know a man who has good health, and so as he drives to Walmart, and I know how many of us do, we drive and drive and drive until we find a spot right there close to the front door. But he parks far away from the front door. And the reason he does so is because he's a servant of Jesus. He says, "I'm in good health, I can walk, it's no trouble for me, and I'll just leave my parking space closer to the building for those who have greater need than I." That's the kind of service and sacrificial mindset that I think we need to develop. There's no glory in it. There's nothing about anybody patting you on the back or getting personal praise from it. It's just the attitude of service. One person doing what he can to minister to his fellow man. And that's the mindset of Jesus. Also, I'd like to remind you that service is not always easy. Sometimes it's difficult. And when it's difficult, I would encourage you to serve regardless. The Bible tells us in 2 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 12 that all who live godly in Christ Jesus will suffer persecution. In fact, Peter even said in 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 12 through 14, "Beloved, do not think it a strange thing when fiery trial comes upon you, as though some strange thing has happened to you." Peter said, expect trouble. The Apostle Paul said, expect trouble. If you serve God, you will find difficulty in life. And when that difficulty comes, don't quit. Don't give up. You need to stand fast and firm. I've known people, when faced with criticism, when they do their dead level best to do the best job they can, someone will criticize. Or maybe someone will fail to acknowledge or give thanks to them. Maybe their name doesn't reach the church bulletin. Maybe no one makes a big fuss and pats them on the back. And when those things happen, sometimes people just say, you know, if I'm not going to be treated any better than that, I'm done. They can find somebody else to do it. I quit. How many elders have quit shepherding the flock of God because they become discouraged and frustrated and feel unthanked? How many preachers have quit preaching because they don't have the response that they would like to have in other people? Friends, I'm suggesting that